Hey YouTubers, okay, time for another video. This time we're going to have a bit of a deep dive on the YZ400. The aim is to have a look at the piston and rings and see if how the wear is on those, and they're probably pretty end of life, so we're looking at getting a new piston. Just the question is what size. So aim just now is to have a quick whip off of the head and get down to the piston, maybe take the piston out and then give that a good inspection, and then if necessary order up a new piston and get that in there so that we can keep on rolling. Okay, let's get to it. So I think it'll be seat, tank, exhaust, and then carburetor, and then maybe the head. Let's see how we go. Okay, we're into it a bit. So seat, tank and side panel off. But just before we get into the cylinder, just thought it'd be worthwhile checking the compression. So I do have this nice compression tool, and just got that on an adapter onto the top of the head there. And as you can see, we're pushing after about, I don't know, 8 to 10 kicks, and I'm a bit out of breath. The compression is tight as, and I'm nearly at 150, maybe 140, 25, 30, 35, 40, 145 psi, maybe 10 bar. So that's pretty healthy, I think. I'll look that up and see what's recommended, but otherwise we'll keep going. Okay, so air pipe and carby off and out the way, and cylinder head ready to undo. Just put a bit of penetration oil on those bolts. They go straight down to the head, which is a bit there, so we won't be able to see that very well. A bit leaky, and then down to the cylinder bolts, which won't be quite as tight, hopefully, and we'll see how we go. And then on this side, carby just out the way, we'll give that a bit of a clean up, a bit of inspection while we're on it, and seal those gaskets up as we reassemble and see how we go. So let's see if we can get this head off. Okay, so time to take the head off. Got the bolts undone there, all the nuts are off. There is washers on all of those, so just got to be a bit careful. Seems reasonably free. And just in case you didn't know, the last time I had this head off and cylinder, I would say was about 1985. So just around knocking on 40 years ago. And you might not believe it, but she hasn't been opened since. So let's see what we got. Of course, it could be horrible, or it could be fine. Or it might not come off. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Ooh. A little bit messy. Not too bad though. And quite clean under there. Okay, I'm happy with that. So let's put that down carefully. Just have a little look in here, see what's going on. Get the carby out the way. I might be able to hopefully give it a little bit of a spin. There we go. You know, to me, that looks fine. Wouldn't mind some comments if you want to give your opinion on that. But listening to that and looking at that, I think she's fine. We'll see how we go. Let's get the head off and have a look at the bore. Okay, so the head's off, and I've just washed that off. It's not too bad. That paint came off first time ever, interestingly. But the head's pretty clean, and the barrel's pretty clean, but is a bit wet. I'll just let that dry down. And then looking at the piston, it's okay, but there is a couple of little nicks. I don't know if you can see that one there. Little nick there, some wear at the bottom of the skirt, bit of blow by at the top, and same on the other side, a few little scores. These really weird notches, not sure what those are, on the back of the piston, but otherwise the ribbing's still there on the skirt, which is interesting. So I'm not sure how that's going to measure, but I'm going to measure that tomorrow and just going to whip it off in a second and have a look at that. See if we can try and work out whether that's worth replacing or not. And the other thing to note is that it is a 1 on the piston. So I think, I don't know if that's 1 over size. If it is, then that's been completely overboard. I don't think so though, because I think it's 0.25, 0.5 and 0.75, but there might be a 1 above that. Anyway, we'll get it measured up and we'll see what we think. Okay, more progress to come. So I'm not sure where we got to on the last video. I think it was just getting the head off and starting to have a look at things, but things moved on a little bit since then. So apart from cleaning a few of these parts up, excuse me, and trying to see what we're looking at, just go through the parts and show you where we've got to. So if we start with the cylinder head, there's a few little pits around here. Not totally happy with those, but I'm just going to leave them. I might scour them a little bit, try and remove a few of them. They might create a few hot spots there, a bit of pre-ignition, but otherwise the head's not too bad. Looking at the barrel, we did measure this up, and it measured, I'll put the numbers up on the description, but I think it was just over 86, so it was like 86.008 from memory, and that's pretty good. Quite happy with that, because this is on measurement, and just checking the number 1 on the piston, and you can see what's been through there. This is a 1mm oversized piston, so that means it's the largest overbore for this barrel, and as you can see there, it's a little rattly, depends which way around you put it. It's pretty tight that way, but that way it's got the rattle, and that's the way it's sitting in the bike. And you can hear that piston slap when it's running. So I have ordered a new piston. It's actually coming as a piston kit with the two rings, the gudgeon pin and the circlips. So that's on the way, but it's not here yet, and I need to run the bike this weekend. So the good news was the rings are not broken. The gudgeon pin is a little pitted. You can see that corrosion there on the pin. And even the small end bearing, some of the bearing rollers there, a bit hard to see in this light, you can just see there some of that corrosion. So new gudgeon pin, new small end bearing to be ordered to go on that new gudgeon pin that's coming. The gaskets are a bit of a mess, we'll come to that in a second. And then just a clean up of the exhaust parts. So the exhaust seal there, the exhaust clamp, and a few of the bolts. Need to get through a few of those and clean those up. But the aim tonight will be just to get this head back on. Nothing wrong with the ports, nothing wrong with the reeds. All of these surfaces a bit dirty, need cleaning up. But what did arrive direct from Disaster Motors in Canada, thank you Dave, is my new seal set. So I'm going to put that on hold until I get the new piston and rings and get everything together. But in here we've got the crankcase seal, the stator seal on this side, we've got the inlet seal just sitting at the back there. I think that one's a spare. This is a DT400. You can see it's just slightly different. So we do have this funny shaped seal here in the middle. Sorry, this one here. And then what I did really want was this exhaust seal and the new head gasket, which interestingly looks quite different to mine. So I'll have to do a bit of research and find out which way up that goes, because you can see it's got a sort of a concave, convex shape to it, a little bit different to my one. Hopefully that's the same. It also goes out a little bit further. So I believe mine's factory, or at least 39 years in the bike, so early 80s. If I did change it back then, I can't remember. And then also these O-rings, not sure where they go, we'll work that out as we go. Alright, so that's the story right now. Let's get the head back on, get some of this cleaned up, get the head bolts back on, cylinder bolts, head bolts, piston back on, and then at least it will be halfway there. So got the gudgeon pin hammered in with the small end. Don't forget the arrow on the piston always goes to the front, to the exhaust port. One thing that really will upset your day if you get that wrong. And the pins in there, it's pretty loose just now. I'm just going to put the circlips in. They're a bit fiddly. They have this little hook on them, so you need to squeeze them in and rotate them around at the same time. And just one good hint, I'm sure everyone knows, just put a rag in your engine there, because if you drop a circlip in there, it's probably game over. Not sure what you do to start on that little journey. So I'm just going to make sure that this rag's nicely covering up all those gaps. And then just handily, if you do have an RMX 250, just so happens that a nice block of wood fits between the expansion cylinder and the back of the piston, just to give that a little hammer. And if you're hammering a gudgeon pin in, then a 1/2 inch extension fits just beautifully for pushing on that. Okay, let's get those clips in and we'll get the cylinder on. So this is where it all gets to be a bit of a pain. I've got the old gasket at the bottom there with a bit of silicon sealant, high temperature sealant, and now I've got to try and get the barrel over the rings and get it down onto those pins. So let's see how we go, and I'll give it a few minutes. So seems to have gone on okay, not too much silicone pouring out, and the just put a bit of WD on the cylinder there just to stop it scratching, and I'd say we're doing okay. So let's get the head bolts, get the main bolts on and clean those up, and then we'll get the head on and the head bolts. So just looking at these engine cylinder bolts, so there's 4 of these, they're aluminium, and you'd think that they would struggle a little bit with the torque, but they seem to be designed for it. I've cleaned these up a little bit, not a huge amount, and I'm just going to drop those in just like that. And then I'm using this 12mm, not very strong drive socket, because it's hard to get that to fit down there. We'll just find some torque numbers for those, get those torqued up, and at least the cylinders assembled, and we can move on to the head. Okay, they've gone on pretty nice. That one's getting a bit stiff. Okay, so put those on, we'll just get those tightened up. So head's back on and all torqued down, and looking pretty good, and also sounding pretty good with lots of compression. A bit of lube in there. So let's get on to the carb and the reeds next, I think, and then the exhaust. So this is the only set of reeds I've got, and it would be interesting if anybody's got a comment on whether they're any good. But I've put a bit of silicone, a bit of that engine gasket on there, and we're just going straight in with that one, and straight in with the rubber inlet. That rubber inlet I purchased, I think came from the US. They're exceedingly expensive, and they do decay over time. But with a bit of luck, this one might see me out. So just get that back in. All of this is a bit temporary until my new piston comes, and then we're going to do another full rebuild. Not sure if we're going to do anything else at the same time, but the main aim for this one is just to get the old girl running for the weekend and have a ride and see how we go. Just while I'm putting these on, one other thing I did notice while I was down here was this nut missing completely off this chassis bolt. So we'll just look for one of those and see if we can fix it up while we're in here. Okay, let's get those tightened up and get the carburetor in. Might just do a check of the float valve on the carby while we've got it apart. So just a little open heart surgery on the carburetor before we put it back together. So the bike tends to drink a lot of fuel, and I was thinking it was going to be the piston or rings, but now they look in pretty good nick. I was just checking the jetting, so I've got a 370 main jet. I'm not sure what the pilot is, and I'm not sure what the settings are, but I did just check the float valve. So this is the float valve. The carburetor was new about 2 years ago, so it should be pretty good. And as you can see, the float chamber's looking all okay, floats are looking okay, and I think the main point there is that the float valve setting was just a little bit out of whack, so I've just bent the plate a little bit so that now I'm getting it more like 19mm rather than 17mm when the float's assembled and pushing on the valve there, on the main valve for the inlet. So we'll see how that goes. We'll get it back together and see what we go like on the next ride. So let's keep going. So carby back together with that new float position, and found a nice bolt for this one, and this bolt was loose also, so just tighten it up. It's a really interesting design how they get that top tube there going down, and I know it's a bit hard to see and this bike really needs a reno, but this bracket here used to be broken through. Both of those used to be broken through, and many years ago I got my brother to weld those up, so at least sort of half good. A bit of an irony that this one was still loose, even though that's the one that wasn't welded. Okay, let's get the airbox back on. I had to get the airbox off. Just those 3 fixings on the airbox. Get those back together and we'll be good. Right, so carby's back on. Got all these 3 Jubilee clips done back up and the airbox back on. So now all that's tightened up, we can get on to the exhaust. And that's going to be putting on the front exhaust interface, getting the clutch in position, and then hopefully getting that all back together, and then we should be ready for just about a run. Let's see how we go. So now I'm going to get on with the exhaust, but before I do that I think I'll do a little bit of rectification, because I was just checking out the clutch and I noticed I've got a kind of special clutch feature, so I think we'll fix that first. So as well as moving the carburetor, I thought I'd take the opportunity just to drop the needle a little bit. So this is the needle that I've got, and the number on that is a 6F16. I don't know if you can see that in the picture, probably not. 6F16, and it's on the middle slot at the moment. So I'm just going to drop that down 1 clip, so moving the clip up, which will make the bike run a tiny bit leaner on the quarter throttle to half throttle. And I'm going to see if that cleans the spark plug up. But looking at the spark plug, let's get this one in here. This one may have failed on the last ride. This is the kind of colour I get from a normal run. So it's not too bad. There's a little bit of carbon build-up, and it's got a slight light grey to that colour. So we'll try that, see how that goes, and try it on this run with some different oil, and hopefully get to see what that looks like. Okay, let's keep going. So first up is the sealing ring. So this goes up on the cylinder, and then this flange assembly goes on, and what we're doing is just putting on a couple of spring washers excuse me, to give a bit of a better clamping on that bolt before we get the exhaust on and hold it on with these springs. So the other thing is this is pretty worn here, but I think we're just going to go with it for now. It's not too bad, and maybe fix it up another day. Okay, so let's get this on, going on there with that bracket, and then the exhaust. Right, so as you might have just seen, I got it mostly together. Exhaust back on, side panel was back on. Just playing with the carburetor and trying to fix up the air screw setting and the idle setting, and really wasn't having a lot of luck with that, so gave up in the end. but as you can see, could just about get it to idle. Seemed to be running okay, and was just trying to work out the regulator wiring, which I previously hooked up and didn't seem to go so well. But the good news was engine's back together, running okay. Next step's give it a ride tomorrow, and then we'll be pulling the engine down with the new piston, new rings, new gudgeon pin. Got to order the small end